Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. Are you tired of full-time work? Are you thinking about what's next? Transitioning to the next phase of your life can be really hard without the proper guidance and forward thinking. Today, I'm talking with Natalie Yan-Chatonsky, the founder and CEO of Full-Time Lives. Nat talks about transitioning to retirement, or as she says, transitioning to full-time living. Here Nat's 5 key ingredients to achieve a sustainable transition to full-time living. Well, welcome Nat to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
One of the things I like to ask our guests is why they went into the specific field they went into. And you're talking about, and we'll talk about the word retirement later, but that's years away for you. So what interested you in to get into this field?
Well, I've had an extensive career in product management, innovating new products and services in lots of different sectors, including e-commerce, telco, financial services. And in my last corporate job, I was spending a lot of time with people in operational roles working for banks. And I guess in parallel with observing how they responded to digital transformation happening in the banking sector, I was also on the personal front observing how my parents were approaching retirement.
Right.
So it was probably the confluence of professional observations around how do people adapt to change from a work perspective as well as lifestyle perspective, and then realizing that no one's actually supporting people through the journey of transition when you're in the second half of your life.
Right. And you've brought up a couple of points there regarding the workplace, and we'll cover that in a bit later. But interesting, because that resonates with me too about your own parents and in my parents-in-law and seeing how they went through that transition. And some do it really easily, but some don't, even in the same relationship.
Yeah, that's been my observation as well, that I wanted to unpack exactly why some people have ended up designing and living the most inspiring lives in their 70s and 80s, and what makes it different. What did they do differently earlier in their lives that we can unpack and distill and then inspire people to take a similar path to find their own way of being inspiring and purposeful and fulfilled in their lives later in life?
You're very inspiring, Nat. Just so I can hear it in your voice. And one of the things I really liked, which was attracted to yourself and your business, was this Full-Time Lives name. I guess full-time working, full-time lives, the transition. How did that come about?
Well, my initial research of talking to lots of people at different stages of retirement, I realized the word retirement was a dirty word.
Yes.
So then I flipped it and thought, well, what is aspirational for this market of people at that stage of moving into retirement? And I realized that moving from full-time work into the alternate is not moving into retirement. It's still doing something full-time, but it's more of a philosophy and mindset in terms of how do you look at your next chapter. So where we landed was full-time living, because that can include work, but it can also be unpaid work. It could be mentoring people. It can be having a good time, hobbies, spending time with family and new connections. It can be lots of different things for different people. So I realized I want to build a movement, and full-time living is very much the approach for everyone defining what's right for them as they make their transition into the next chapter.
Yeah, no, very well put. I really like, and we'll go into this in how you've segmented the different areas, because with my background being in financial advice, most 90% of it, at least from our clients when they come in and see me, is about the money. Will they have enough money? And that's definitely important, because you don't want to be forced to continue working. You want to be working if you decide that's what you want to do, because you want to rather than because you have to. So going into a little bit of that, maybe people, when they approach when we say in retirement, when we say in the book year R, when you approach year R in this transition. Yes, there is a money, and maybe you're thinking about health, but maybe we should go into some of those different areas that you talk about, and just on each one we can just discuss.
Yeah. So our 5 key ingredients are having a sense of purpose. So being really clear about what makes you feel valued and what are your skills and experience that you enjoy using, and what are you passionate about. So it's a combination of lots of different factors, and it's very hard for people to distill that and understand it, because it's sometimes one thing for some person. Like my father, who's a doctor, is very passionate about his profession, and his sense of purpose is all wrapped up in his job, because it includes all of that. He's contributing to others, it's highly valued, he's very passionate, he's very good at it. And then sense of community is also another area, another one of the 5 key ingredients. And for some people, that's actually quite hard to define. What does that mean outside of your career and your industry? So we tend to focus mostly on that sense of purpose and your community as you plan that next chapter of your life when you go through midlife transition. Then
So might just, because you said there's 5, and we'll just slowly go through these, but 2, exactly right. That purpose, and I actually much prefer that. When I talk to my clients, is what's that next big challenge? You can't just think, okay, you've been a GP, or my father-in-law was a baker and phenomenal, won a lot of awards. But once he stopped, he just didn't know what his identity was, what his next big challenge was, and he tried a few different things. He should have actually probably stayed a baker to the rest of it, because he just loved it. And so there's those sort of things. So purpose is so important. Is there actually examples? I suppose a lot of corporate executives who work very hard, and then all of a sudden they retire and just don't know what to do. They can't sit at home all day.
Yeah, I see that model all the time. And I've also interviewed a lot of people in that C-suite who've been incredibly successful, have all the money in their world, but what's missing is that sense of identity and sense of purpose. And that's something you need to work on in parallel with exiting your C-suite role.
Right.
And it's something that can take many years, if not decades, to figure out what gives you that sense of purpose at work that you can transfer outside of work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be time consuming. It's just figuring out whether it's community activities. Is it being on the board of a not-for-profit? Is it about mentoring other people in up and coming management leadership roles? Everyone's got to figure it out for themselves, but that takes time to get to know yourself.
Yes.
In order to then create the opportunities to figure out what are the next steps, and then experimenting to shape that lifestyle of what comes next after that C-suite position.
And is there a place for employers to help with their employees, to help transition?
For sure. Given that the workplace is 5 generations, there's a lot of opportunity to really acknowledge what each generation brings to the workforce. And I think whilst there's a lot of focus on upskilling, training, and giving younger people opportunities, equally, if older staff got the same opportunities to learn, reskill, and also contribute by mentoring other people in either other teams or younger generations, it doesn't have to be an age thing to be matched, but the whole concept of two-way mentoring, where not only are you coaching someone and transferring knowledge and experience, but equally those people in their midlife and older are also learning from other functional areas or younger people. If there's a two-way exchange, it's more likely to be a more enduring sort of relationship where everyone gets something out of it and it's more natural. So those sorts of mentoring relationships are more likely to last longer. So giving people the opportunity to meet and interact with people of different generations and different knowledge bases within an organization. That's one thing. And then giving people the flexibility. So not assuming that people are definitely going to retire. That's not always the case. Everyone wants to make different decisions at different stages. So having that open conversations to ask older staff, well, what are you looking for in your job? What can we do to retain you? And also the knowledge and experience that they have. That corporate IP is incredibly valuable. And once they walk out that door, it's very hard to bring that back. So what can you do to keep that IP alive and relevant, but in a more cohesive manner across the whole organization, across the different generations in the workforce?
Yeah, I think with that, having that peer-to-peer learning is just so appreciated by staff. I know a lot of times you bring in experts and consultants, and I suppose we're consultants in a way, but having someone within your own organization who just gets it, that can be just so valuable. And I wish more employers would actually take advantage of it. Oh, the other point you made was about community then, the second one. And when I first did your exercise at your quiz, and we'll talk about your quiz, I was not quite sure about community, but I was just thinking, okay, am I helping my council or my local area and something, the local footy club? But no, your definition of what community is if you like, and I'd rather you explain, but I think that's a really big part of retirement. Also, that transition is that community aspect. And
what is community to you is going to be different to me. So community can be relationships with a small group of people where you're all backing each other. So as a female entrepreneur, I have a group of people who I will, meet up with on a regular basis, and we all help each other out in terms of helping them think through startup business challenges. So that can be one type of community. Then another type of community is more industry-based. That's more related to my expertise in, say, around financial services and diversity. That's one interest area. Another could be more about local, giving back to your local community, whether it's a community garden. It could be around an interest or a hobby. And it could be a whole bunch of different things. So if you kind of start to plan out the lifestyle of what it might look like after full-time work, it could be a bunch of different communities that you're contributing to and being involved with. And they could be quite cyclical in terms of it's not something you do all year round. So you can design it however you want. What does community mean to you, and what do you want to get out of it, and how can you contribute?
And it's a lot of those skills that you've built over a lifetime are transferable.
Yeah.
And an example is I know a Qantas pilot who's retired, and those skills of navigation and all that, he's helping his surf life rescue, and that they need that technical experience. And it's just amazing how he can now transfer those skills to get that type of training would be a very expensive exercise, but he can actually just transfer those skills very easily because he already has them, a lifetime of experience. So I think there is a lot of things. And even if it's just your local charity, it's a lot of people just, if I only had the time, would be great to give back.
Yeah.
And I do believe in the saying, you're put on this earth to serve. So there's a lot of opportunities. You've just got to see, well, what can I bring of value and help whatever particular community it is, and even, as you said before, mentoring or coaching.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time and research to figure out which community or organisation you want to contribute to. So it's just like job hunting. You got to do your research. Every organisation or community is going to be different. It's got its own culture and different goals. Whether you fit in and believe in exactly what they're trying to do at that stage of that organisation or group, sometimes it might well be that you step in as an advisor occasionally, contributing. Others, it might be a lot more hands-on. So it's really trying to understand what can you contribute and what's valuable that you can give that they actually need at that point in time. And that takes time. So it's about really reaching out to your network to understand, well, what do they think you're really good at? and then identifying which organization or community actually needs what you've got to offer. So it's not necessarily something listed on a job board. You've actually got to go and find those opportunities. And that takes a lot of time to find the right match.
Yeah, and I think, the way you're explaining it, it shouldn't be a last minute decision. This is something you can transition over 5, 10, 20 years.
Yeah. And it just comes back to your example of your pilot friend. He probably did figure out well and truly years ago that was his strength in terms of being able to coach people, and also he felt fulfilled. You don't know until you get there how you're going to feel about it until you've actually tried it. So a lot of people in our Full-Time Lives community will say that they thought something was going to be fantastic until they actually tried it and they realized, I don't want to do this every day for the rest. I may as well go back to what I was doing professionally if I'm going to do this. So it's being really clear about, well, of all the different skills and experience that you've actually got to contribute, which one of those do you want to continue applying and using? Because you don't have to use all of it. You don't need to fall back on what the default is. It's just really being clear about what is it that you want to intentionally move forward with.
Well, that's 2 of the 5. So what's the next one?
So the next one is vitality. So you mentioned before health, and I see vitality as not just physical health, but it's also the mental health as well as social health, because I think, and that ties back in with community. So having very healthy relationships and social connections, having people around you who help you feel regenerated when you're feeling stressed or as you're going through change. So vitality, I guess, is a combination of having those supportive networks along with a really healthy lifestyle. And I guess it's quite obvious in terms of how do you maintain a healthy lifestyle, and everyone's going to be different in terms of how they design the sorts of activities that's going to be sustainable and bake in those right habits to eat well, to feed your mind, and to be well.
And you make a good point in that it's just not the physical, because that's easy. Yep, I should try and stay fit and stay healthy and eat right. But mental health is so important. And I think especially if we don't know what our purpose is, it's very easy to slip into a depressive state, getting anxious about the future. And if you don't even have anyone to talk to, it's a very lonely situation.
There's been many loneliness research that's out there, and probably the most famous piece of research has come out of Harvard, the longitudinal longevity piece of research that's still going. And that's been happening for many decades now, where they've traced people over a number of years in terms of their health. One of the contributing factors to positive well-being is reducing the factors around loneliness. So that's something that we can actually all manage, but it's about starting early. It's about ensuring that you've got healthy relationships and you're contributing to your community. So coming back to the point earlier on, we were talking about community. It is all interrelated. Your wellness is very much tied in with reducing the risk of chronic health. And I've also gone to a couple of the blue zones where people live the longest life expectancies. So I've been to Okinawa, which is a southern island in Japan, where people live well and truly beyond 100. And there is a really strong sense of community and relationships and sense of curiosity about others, no matter what age you're at. And being able to, I guess, connect with others. And it's just there's so much evidence around why that social welfare, social wellness is very much tied in with vitality.
And even what you were saying before about retirement being a negative word for a lot of people, because they think, well, my life's over. And as you just said then, having that sense of purpose, sense of community, and just enjoying life, well, it's great, but we've got to get away from this retirement being a negative word. It's just the next stage of your life, and an exciting stage of your life.
Especially if you've really been quite intentional about looking at it as not one massive chunk of time. It's not a big phase in your life. It's actually multiple stages. So it's actually, by breaking it down into smaller chunks, there's that period immediately after giving up paid full-time work. And yes, there's always that, year or two that people want to travel and have a break and really, think about what their next steps are. So I'm not necessarily saying that don't do that, because I think everyone deserves a break and to have time off and really think about what their next steps are. But it's also being really clear about what does your day-to-day lifestyle look like after that? How are you going to fill your days in a meaningful, purposeful way that's also healthy and connected?
Yeah, totally agree. So after vitality, what?
The other one would be lifelong learning. And I'd say from listening to a lot of people who come to our programs and workshops, this is one thing that it's relatively easy for people to tap into, because if you've got that growth mindset and you're constantly asking questions and you're wanting to improve yourself, this can be done formally by going and doing courses and going back to university, but it can also be reskilling. So whether you're looking for a new vocational skill that you want to build up with a plan to actually go and start a new career, or it's just out of personal interest to keep your mind active, or it's an opportunity to connect with like-minded people who are at a similar stage in life. There's many different ways to contribute to this idea of lifelong learning, and that's incredibly valuable when it comes to staying relevant. So whether it's staying relevant in a profession, if you want to stay on the same track that you're currently on, but maybe scaling it down and looking at how do you transfer that skill and experience to others, or doing something brand new and reinventing yourself in your career. So there's many applications, but what is fundamental to it is really having that growth mindset.
Yeah, and I often say, and it's a bit simplistic, but, Google is for information, but books are for knowledge. And yes, of course, you can have audio books and you could just do courses, and it's not just physical books, but it's the point that, we should just always learn. Just sitting there in front of a TV is not learning. And there is definitely, for longevity, and the stats say there is over 500,000 over 85. So we are living longer. And I just think keeping that brain active is such an important point. For me, learn a language. I'm desperate to learn Italian. I've started and stopped, but it is one of those, bucket list. I just want to be fluent in Italian. And I look forward to, doing that and being that. And that's just learning.
And there's many different ways to learn, not just from books, it's experiential as well. So all my life, I've had an interest in Japan, and I've spent many years as a student on exchange in Japan. And I go back for my work and learn new things to be inspired by Japanese culture. And it's, there's many things we can learn around longevity and healthy aging from Japan. So I find that creating those opportunities for myself to keep learning from other communities and other cultures, that's a fun thing, because I can link it with my passion for travel, with learning. And then that also underpins all the other ingredients around building a sense of community. My purpose is to transfer my knowledge and experience to others, to inspire people going through midlife change. And that makes me feel fulfilled and vitality, because it's about connecting around a common purpose. So all of these 5 key ingredients are really interrelated, and you can't do without one of them. You've actually got to try and figure out a way to blend it all. But not to overwhelm people, just start somewhere. Just pick one of the 5 key ingredients, whether it's lead with your strength, or pick one where you feel like you need a little bit more help, whether it be purpose or community, because that's where we commonly find that people need the most amount of help there. Picking one area, starting small, and then building and trying to connect it with the other areas, it's going to be sustainable, positive transition.
Thanks for that. Wealth must be the last we haven't spoken about that. So in your view, obviously my view, but for that topic, what's wealth?
I think it's about knowing how much is enough. So it's not necessarily accumulating so much as a goal in itself, but just knowing in order to sustain the lifestyle that you want to lead and is going to give you that sense of purpose and healthy connection, how much do you need, and how are you going to make sure that you bring all the other aspects of your lifestyle in order to sustain that? So it's about sustaining a healthy and wealthy enough lifestyle that enables you to feel like you're leading the life that you want to lead.
Yes, very much agree with that. Our purpose is not to be rich. Our purpose, and that's when I like the word wealth, is just enough to have financial freedom. We want to, whether we want to keep on working, whether we want to travel, whatever we decide our purpose is or our next big challenge, we just need enough so that we feel comfortable that we have enough to live on for the rest of our lives. And one of the things I do struggle with a lot of the clients I coach or the clients I had that were retiring and I'd come back a year or two late and they would be just not doing what they're doing, or they were skimping on just the basics. And I was just saying, you've got all this funds there for this next stage of your life. I said, oh, yeah, but I want to make sure I look after my adult children and that. I said, it was a famous quote, this acronym SKI, Spend Kids Inheritance. And I firmly believe that our job is to provide our kids knowledge, and eventually you'll pass if we can leave them something as a head start to life. But once we have this next challenge, and it's a lot of the mothers I find, you've just got to say no. If you ask your adult kids, they want you to enjoy your life, this next stage. But even that mindset, you have to help a lot of the clients in that next stage of life.
I really believe that it's important for you to still feel like you've got a role to play in inspiring the next generation. So whether it's your own family members or people you've worked with, people can see when you're really engaged and really enjoying life. So, and they want to be happy for you. So I think there's many ways to contribute to supporting your adult children, and it's not just financially.
Yeah, agree. What we haven't actually spoken about, and how all this rolls, because I really like how you split up into 5 different areas, is how, as a couple, these 5 can mean very different to the husband, to the wife, or to the partners. And so how have you found that when you're meeting a couple, or your experience in the past in your research on how to help them when they've got different goals?
I think it's really important to acknowledge that they've both got different goals and an approach to making life transition. So it's giving both of them adequate space and time to do it at their own pace. That's really important, to make sure that they've got their separate paths, but at the same time communicate with each other and run experiments on their own, but also occasional experiments together to see how it fits. So as long as both are really clear that their paths aren't always just, together, but they can have their separate interests and separate, pace at which they might plan their retirement. They don't necessarily have to do it at the same time. I think it's really important to acknowledge that it might take longer for one person than the other, and the way they want to go about it might be different from the other. So not assuming that just because they're in a relationship, they're going to do it all at the same time in the same way.
Yes, and one might want to keep on working and one might, but financially they're both able to stop if they wanted to, but that's just not what their purpose is. Do you find a lot of couples just don't even talk about it?
Yes, I see that all the time, particularly when it comes to signing up to our programs, that if they've told me that they're in a relationship, then I always try and encourage them to both go on the journey of exploring some of these concepts around the 5 key ingredients for themselves, as well as encouraging their partner to do it either on the same program or at another point, because it's important that they share what they're thinking with the other, and the other is also thinking about it. But it's not to say that they have to do it at the same time. But as long as they're both got common language and an approach that is common to both of them. So I definitely think it's useful for people to surface their ideas, to have open conversations with their partner as they're going through this exploration stage.
And for the advisor network, a lot of advisors do think, and this is definitely something that's transitioning in our profession, is that they thought, well, our responsibility is just to get them to retirement with enough money. But I think more and more advisors, and Tim Henry is a perfect example, who's someone I know and you've worked with, see that no, money is just one aspect, the whole 5 different key areas you have, that having someone who's independent, who's a third party, who's not emotionally involved, can be very helpful in helping you understand, well, what is this next big, how to transition to this next big challenge.
Yeah. That's why we've chosen to work directly with the financial advisors, because I think it's a really powerful combination of the conversation around how much wealth do I need to make that transition from full-time work, along with these big questions around what gives me that sense of purpose and connection. How do I make that transition? At what pace do I do it at? And when do I think I'm going to be ready for it? And that's going to dictate how does that wealth management plan look like, because you've got really good you've got a solid foundation for actually knowing how you're going to behave when you get there, as opposed to trying to guess whether that dream that you have in your life in terms of when I have enough money, when I've got enough time, how am I going to feel? Instead of trying to guess, like having that parallel approach to experimenting as you're still working and accumulating wealth is the best way to go. So that's why it's really good for us to work directly with the advisors to support them in having those conversations with their clients.
Yeah, and I think that's that approach where you're supporting advisors who have already the relationship with that client and can sometimes have those hard conversations is important. The government provides a government pension for a lot of people, and for a lot of Australians when they are approaching retirement or year R, it's there. The government really could do more, couldn't they? Is it helping employers help their staff, or how would you see if the government sort of said, "Yep, okay, we're understanding there's this transition and we need to help everyday Australians in doing this"? Where do you see they could actually help?
They could help on so many levels. There's system change that needs to happen in terms of supporting people in the way they need more flexibility in the workforce. From an employment perspective, there's attitudinal change in terms of breaking down barriers from an ageism perspective. So ageism is still the last form of discrimination in the workforce. So there's attitudinal things that need to change around enabling people who want to work to be able to continue to find work and stay in their jobs. So unfortunately, that's still a barrier that's reducing the number of options that people have in terms of when it comes to designing their work-life balance later in life. And then there's also mental wellness. So there's a lot of focus just coming out of COVID lockdown on younger people, because COVID's really affected younger people. But I think it's also important to look at the mental wellness of older people as well. And I don't think that's necessarily being addressed right now by the government. And there's a real opportunity to probably bring the two together, coming back to the point about community and intergenerational groups, whether it's in the workforce or outside in community groups, and bringing the two groups closer together to help each other out.
Yes, I think it's a bigger, as you said, a bigger issue than just financial. And because in my mind, it was the minister for this area, Jane Hume, who is actually always open to new ideas, but it's not, is it? It crosses over so many different areas of government that you could nearly have a whole task force just for the aged in helping in this area, this transition. Okay, so a lot of it, and we have used the word transition, and the earlier you get to this, the better. But there could be people who are listening, well, I've just retired yesterday, I'm now 65, and I'm lost. What could they do now as a starting point?
I would run a 1-week experiment. Start small. Don't feel like you need to change your life overnight because that's unrealistic, but break it down in terms of your own expectations. What do you want to learn about yourself? And what do you expect the outcome to be as a result of running that experiment? Because then if you break it down, you're not like too attached to the outcome. You're not feeling like, oh my God, I need to have the answer in terms of what does my new life look like. If you just take it week by week, just running one experiment about yourself, and whether you pick, let's say, lifelong learning as a starting point, what's one thing you want to learn? And who am I going to do it with? So that also ticks the other box around vitality and community. So all of a sudden you're linking a few different areas, and then purpose comes into it, because that's going to define, well, what are you going to learn? What's going to give you joy and that sense of purpose and fulfillment? So all of a sudden you've ticked 4 of those different areas in a 1-week experiment.
And I think, as you say, in anything, small steps, just take it gently. It's in anything, especially when I was talking about retirement or financial freedom, it's never too late.
Yeah.
So those small steps are very good advice. And one of the things I should actually say is that the Full-Time Lives on your website, as well as on some other links, I will provide that at the end of this podcast. So if people want to actually do the quiz, that's all available there for them. So, and I must say I've done it myself, and it's a real eye-opener. So thank you for doing that, Nat. So probably I've kept you long enough. One of the final things, what we call our final bite, is to ask for a piece of advice that, whether you've heard it from family, friends, business, but just something that resonates with you.
I'd say the one thing that I keep on coming back to is something that I've learned from being a product manager, and that is to run experiments. So when we develop a new product or a service, we always break it down in terms of prototyping a product. And in this case, in transition, you are your own product. So it's actually mocking up the lifestyle that you want to create for yourself. And so I always come back to that in terms of having a hypothesis around what do you want to do and get out of it? What's your goal? And do you have the means to actually achieve it? And then testing it out and then looking at the results. So using that scientific approach of testing and learning, and then analyzing what did you learn from that. I think it's a really powerful way to approach life, that you don't get too attached to the goals and dreams that you might have. It's actually making it really achievable, and you're learning and having fun along the way. So I guess it's a really simple way of looking at life, whether it's finding that next new project or opportunity, or it's changing something in your life from a lifestyle perspective. You can apply it to lots of different things. And I find that philosophy has really helped me.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm sure our listeners would have taken a lot out of that, especially if you are considering transitioning to retirement and what that may look like. You've given a lot of help. And as I said, there is the quiz that we will provide links to. So, Nat, thank you very much for being on our show today.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our chat, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to know more about Nat or Full-Time Lives, visit fulltimelives.com. Also, feel free to either email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit my website, themoneysandwich.com, if you have any questions or would like to learn more. Want more practical, easy to understand tips and action lists to help with your money stuff? Buy my book, The Money Sandwich, available now on our website, themoneysandwich.com, as well as major online retailers. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation, and past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is provide tips, coaching, and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from the Money Sandwich.